Hey everybody, it's Brett Benner and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Stack, a bonus nonfiction November edition, where today I'm sitting down with author Lance Garland for his memoir, Out There, Dispatches from My Personal Wilderness. A little bit about Lance. He spends his days fighting fire in Seattle and climbing the mountains of the Pacific Northwest or sailing the Salish Sea. He's written for Outside, Travel and Leisure, Backpacker, Orion, and Climbing, among others. Awarded the 2024 Pathfinder Prize and an American Alpine Club Catalyst Grant, he's also received a fellowship at the Banff Center's Mountain Writing Residency and has been listed as the Best American Journalism and Best Backpacker Stories of all time. His debut memoir is a #1 indie pub bestseller, and he lives in the Pacific Northwest. So enjoy this nonfiction November bonus episode of Behind the Stack. And I am really happy to be sitting down today with Lance Garland for his memoir that just recently came out there, Dispatches from My Personal Wilderness. Thank you so much for being here, Lance. It's great to see you on the screen.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be a guest today.
I have to back up and tell really quickly. I wanted everyone to know that some of the way this came about, it's so random and so funny, is that Lance and I have a mutual friend who I had met before moving up to the Pacific Northwest and who also lived in the same area. And she's like, oh my gosh, I have to introduce you to my friends. And so I was like, great. So she ended up introducing, and the funny thing was you and Oliver were having a party, which you weren't at because you were working. And so I actually didn't meet you. I met Oliver, but all of your friends in this incredible community. And actually Maggie wasn't there either because she was working.
Funny.
So it was this strange thing, but it was great because we got to meet all these people. And then it was like the connection of putting it all together. And then you had the book come out. So it was kind of really fortuitous. And like, how lucky are we to have met you guys? And so this for me is kind of extra special because literally like you're my neighbor, which is so cool.
I love it. It's so rad. And I'm such a book nerd. So imagine my excitement when I actually met you on Instagram first. And I didn't know that you were the friend Maggie was trying to connect us with. And I was like, your Instagram is incredible. This is so awesome. So imagine my
So
excitement
funny.
when I'm like, oh, wow, this is my new neighbor. This is awesome.
I know. So it's funny because I thought, okay, we'll have plenty of stuff to geek out about. So that's really great. So I need to ask, were you always an outdoor kid?
I did not grow up going much into the outdoors other than going to like the local beach. And in the Pacific Northwest, you got to take beach with a grain of salt, literally. It's a rocky, pebbly seaside where you can see the other side of the water. So it's just more like an inlet. But that was the most outdoor stuff that I did growing up, is just like day trips to the beach. I was not a camper. We went camping maybe twice as a family, and it was a disaster. So
Wow.
it was not something that my family did.
Do your siblings have it as well? That kind of
Oh no,
adventurous
I
spirit?
am the only one who's outdoor enthusiast. People think I'm crazy for the things that I do. These day-long backpacking trips where you don't get to shower and you're just dirty and gross and miserable for half the time. But I was in the Navy, and this is actually in the book, where a friend of mine invited me out to a backpacking trip in the North Cascades National Park. And we went out there because we had read this book by Jack Kerouac, Desolation Angels. And in that book, Jack Kerouac writes about his time as a fire lookout. So my buddy's like, let's go to this fire lookout. You can get out there. It's super deep, but let's go out there and camp and go see it for ourselves. So I went on this trip, and that was the last year I was in the Navy. I think it was 2007, so a while ago. And we went out there, and I just fell in love. I mean, we were miles and miles and miles away from the nearest road. The way we did it that time, we got dropped off by a water taxi. So we hiked from the highway down, got a water taxi, took us out in the middle of nowhere, and then we're 30 miles away from the nearest road. And then we go on like a 7-mile hike to get to this fire lookout. And it, to this day, I mean, this fire lookout is just so symbolic of my life and what the outdoors has given me. So
I'm having like shades of John Krakauer.
yes.
Yeah. I should back up a little bit before, because I started to launch it, and then I was like, I didn't even really talk and ask you if you could give a kind of elevator pitch of what your memoir is about. That would be great.
Yeah. So the memoir is pretty much about me, how I overcame the challenges of my life. I was openly gay in the Navy during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Before that, I was raised in an anti gay religion, so I wasn't capable of coming to terms with who I was. In the Navy, I became a witness in a court martial that threatened my career. And then after the Navy, I had to rebuild my life and become the first openly gay fireman in the Seattle Fire Department. So how I got through all those challenges, for me, I needed like something that helped me out. And nature is the thing that helped me. It gave me resilience and it gave me this opportunity to reflect. So the book is about how I managed to get through all that really tough stuff. And it's kind of an homage to nature and the outdoors and how that can help not only me, but the community, get through their tough hours.
Wow. Um, so your family, you have two siblings, right?
I have three. Yep.
You have three,
Yep.
and you're at the upper end, correct?
Yeah, I'm the second. So, but I'm the oldest boy. My sister is the oldest. So kind of the oldest by proxy, because she was the only girl. But anyway, yes, there's four of us.
Yeah, and so you talked about it was a pretty conservative, one would almost say severe religious upbringing. It was a fundamentalist Baptist church. You were homeschooled, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and in terms of your upbringing, in terms of your parents and the way they kind of wanted to effectively protect you all from the outside?
Yeah, the word that they used was sheltered. They
Mm.
kept us sheltered from the world. I was homeschooled. I was also put through the church's school. And then towards the end, my parents didn't have any money. So we ended up going to a public school that was very small, kind of homeschooled group that turned into a public school. Interesting stories. But the point is that they wanted to shelter us and not give us a secular education. The byproduct of that is that I didn't know what gay was until I started working at 16. Really, I mean, there's a scene where in the book, a guy from the homeschool kisses a boy, and it becomes this thing, and he goes to conversion therapy. And for me, before that all happened, I was like, oh, this is amazing. You can kiss a boy. This is so awesome.
Mm.
But then the aftermath of it was very severe. And it became very apparent in my coming of age that it would ruin my life if I was gay. 100%. I'd be excommunicated. Who knew what was outside the circle of my upbringing? I had no idea if you could survive out there. It was a scary situation to feel like your involvement and belonging was contingent on you not being gay. So, I mean, I don't think that my parents were like, you know, hateful of gay people. It's just that they weren't allowed. It was just not something that was in the sphere of influence. So, and then we find out later how that goes.
It's so interesting because you said at 16 you became, you probably had a name for it, but were you aware were you aware when you were young, like something's different, something, even if you couldn't verbalize it yet?
100%, yes. I knew from a very young age. And, we didn't have a secular idea of what gay was. But in church, and there's a scene in church where, they say God hates homosexuals. They're an abomination. That's my understanding of what that is. I didn't know about like same sex love. It was just this two men having sex is you're going to hell. I didn't
Right.
know that there was another idea of what gay was, that you could be married and have kids, or just any other ideas. I had no concept of gay culture at the time.
It's interesting hearing you say all this because, not to the severity of what you went through, but I was raised in the church as well, and so reading about how you would go twice on Sundays, sometimes during the week, all of this so resonated with me. But having that awareness, like you said, of something is off, and also something is really wrong, and not knowing how to, put into words, or even frankly the worst part is having anyone to be able to talk about these feelings that are coming up, right?
Totally. And there's a moment in the book where my grandma, who is not religious, kind of comes, sets me aside and tells me, and I didn't understand what this was when she said it at the time, but it stuck with me. She said, Lance, there's nothing wrong with being gay. And it just stuck because I was like, what do you mean? What is this? And it took me decades to like understand. I was very young when she told me that. It took me forever to understand what that meant and what she was saying to me. And to me, that was profound that I had some support in that, dark place. Because, growing up as a queer kid in a unsupportive or even, scary environment, I mean, that does horrible things to our community. I mean, I don't want to go into the details, but I'm a firefighter now. I see the suicide rate for underrepresented groups, marginalized groups, and queer people are one of those. And I thought there was no future for me too. And when you think there's no future for you, then how do you live?
Yeah, there was it was almost just a sentence in the book where you talk about praying to God, confessing your sins, and asking for Him to change you. And I so remember that. Like, I went to church camp every year. And it's funny when I reflect back on it, I had a counselor who was so wonderful and loving. And I don't necessarily think he was gay, but I think as a young person, I was crushed out on him, but not fully able to understand that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that as a sensitive adult, he probably recognized something, and he was very gentle, and in terms of how he dealt with me, and very loving. And so, and I think about that. I think about that a lot. There's a sequence in here where your sister had a teacher that she loved who was taken out of the school because they were gay. And then later there was the same teacher, Mr. Dennis, who was a really
Mm-hmm.
influential teacher for you in terms of writing. But I have to read something. You were talking about how he came back from the summer vacation and he had pictures, but they were just pictures of him. And so you're questioning who took those pictures and who was on the other side of that. And he said there was truth there somewhere. And I knew someone else had to have taken those pictures all across Europe. I'd imagine who that person could be, content to take the pictures and not be in them, content to be invisible, silent, non-existent in the majority of Mr. Dennis's world, at least from our perspective. A deep sadness began to form in me. Hiding was essential. Silence was the only option. And that just killed me. And I recognize that completely. I had that same, mine was a drama teacher who was so influential to me. But I think even now, the amount of teachers who are under attack for either being gay in these conservative areas or being just supportive and recognizing in kids that there's something different there, it's just such a hard thing.
Absolutely. I mean, seeing all the book bannings and the "Don't Say Gay" in Florida, and I mean, it 100% triggers me from my youth.
Yeah.
It is something that I talk with my best friend was with me on this whole journey of life, and we talk about that. Like, can you believe that this is still going on, and even coming back so strong with like a new administration of this hatred and this intolerance. And so, yeah, it's incredibly scary. And I think our teachers are put in a horrible position because teachers are
Awful.
supposed to show you the world and encourage curiosity. And then when they're not allowed to, I mean, it is awful. I think that teachers have the most important job in society and they are put in an impossible position with politics.
Being raised in this environment, I'm just curious, how has your view of religion changed? Do you view yourself as a religious person, or more of a spiritual person, or how do you view it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I had a conversation 2 days ago about this. I am not a religious person. I don't follow a
Mm,
dogma, but it's funny because like Jesus is the icon in the Christian religion, and I personally think that Jesus is an incredible role model. And I still try to model my life after him. I mean, what an incredible way to live your life. But as far as going to church or adhering to a structure, that's not really my thing. Me and my husband talk about the fact that we're having kids now. We just had our first kid, and instead of raising them in a religion, we want to give them some sort of structure. And my answer to that structure is nature. I want them to feel connected to the earth, to the world, to be able to go out and experience those spiritual moments that I've found in the mountains, in the forests, on the ocean, in the seas. And so that's my sort of stand-in, is this deep connection to place is my
mm,
religion. But I don't have anything against religious people as long as they don't try to hurt me and my family. I think that I've met on my journey lots of Christian people who are incredibly loving and incredibly supportive and really are emblems of what Jesus stood for. And then I've also seen the ones who are constantly trying to, control and have intolerance and hatred and discriminate. And I mean, so I have no place for that in my life. I welcome religious people as long as they are a human and have kindness and understanding. And unfortunately, the types of churches that I grew up in, that is not allowed. There is no
Yeah.
communication. I was excommunicated when I came out. Very few people talked to me again from that whole environment after I came out. It was clear as day.
But your family does. I mean, I know your relationship with your mom has evolved a lot, but do you still keep up with your dad?
No, me and my dad are sort of excommunicated. And that's a whole nother story that is kind of in the book, but is, a
Yeah.
lot to go through. But yeah, as far as my mom, I think I put my mom and our evolution in this book because I think it's a great example of even when there's this difference and even when someone really believes in their religion, you can still find a path to reconciliation and to a relationship. And me and my mom found that together, and it was hard and it was long, and we had to have a lot of patience and a lot of conversation. But now it's amazing. She calls my husband her son in love. She is
I
incredibly
love that.
supportive, and she's, I think her understanding of her religion has evolved in the journey as well, which is what we all can hope from when we learn from each other and love each other, is that we can evolve and learn about each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm jumping to the Navy SEALs because these are the things I learned. First of all, I didn't know that SEAL stood for sea, air, and land. I mean, I'm learning
Yep.
all these things. Because basically an assault can happen from any point, whether it's land or
Yep.
sea or the air, which
Yep.
is amazing. Now, you were always kind of drawn to the idea of this. Was like as a young kid, you liked action movies, you liked the idea of like these people that were like super spies and doing all these things.
So
And then you said that 9/11 was really the catalyst for you to want to pursue it. So you were probably like what, 15 when 9/11 happened?
gosh, I'm not totally sure. It was 2 years before I graduated, so maybe like 16. Yeah, something like
Okay,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we get into the Navy SEALs. First of all, this was one of the parts for me that I literally was like, I'm out because the fact that people did this, the fact that people go through this grueling, grueling process of trying to become a SEAL, like my hat's off to you. This part here where it said, we do hundreds of push-ups in sets of 20 while they growl at us from above, then push us with our gear out the door and into a hallway clogged with pedestrian traffic. Bodies are everywhere. The instructors do not tire. Down 3 flights of stairs and into a gauntlet of pressurized water, we crawl and come out into the grinder. They keep the hoses on us. Water burns my eyes as I see flares igniting the courtyard on all sides. Explosions come from the corners as they line us up in ranks. All right, at this point, I've already pooped my pants, and like I
Uh,
so you've got to talk about this because I think this takes a special person, and the fact that you went even as like where you went through with this process, just the physical part of it. Can you talk a little bit about this? And also, what I think is hilarious is you kind of ran into this to try to escape your same-sex attraction, and you
yeah.
landed yourself in a sea of probably the hottest, most in shape, beautiful
Oh,
men in all
totally.
kinds of environments.
I mean, it's hilarious. It's ironic. I mean, I tried to lean into that a little bit because from my vantage point in life, I'm like, wow, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? But you mentioned what is a SEAL, sea, air, and land. Like it made perfect sense because I wanted adventure in my life. I wanted
Mm.
to see the seas. I wanted to go through the land. I wanted to explore. That was my whole, like, in my heart. I had been kept in this tiny cage my whole life, and I wanted to go out there, see the world. That was the whole
Someone
point
needed
of
to
it.
tell you you need to work on a cruise ship.
There's
That
so
would have
many
been so
different
much
ways.
easier.
It's so true, and it's funny because that's where my upbringing came in. Right? It's like I was taught that what you do is you serve your country and you serve your family. So I was
Mm.
very much following this. Even though I was trying to get out, I was still very in the dogma of following the strict path that life should take. And I wasn't quite ready to accept myself as being gay when I went to the SEALs. I thought that this was a way for me to get over it. Really deep down, I was like, oh, if I'm a SEAL, all of my problems go away, and then I'm there. I'm like, okay, it's not going away. Okay, then I start to daydream about, well, can I be a gay Navy SEAL? And here that thought excites me. I'm like in the middle of this. This is an incredibly dangerous thing to do, in my opinion, at the time, is to be a gay Navy SEAL. But I'm like, can I be that? And I came to the conclusion that I couldn't be. And I follow that thread all the way to, becoming the first openly gay fireman. And I revisit that because I find out who the first openly gay Navy SEAL was. And it didn't go well for him either. So long story short, there at Navy SEAL training, I was getting to know who I really was. And I knew I loved adventure. I knew I loved to explore, but I also knew I was gay. And so I had to come to this conclusion. It just had a total breakdown there in my brain and in my soul of like, what am I going to do with my life? And I decided to go out into the unknown instead of trying to fit myself into this box that I could not fit into. And then that's, in my opinion, where my life really started. But boy, it was not easy from the moment I made that decision. For years afterwards, I was still trying to figure out how I could live, and that's when I get into don't ask, don't tell. I do not become a Navy SEAL. I tried and I chose not to continue. And then I went out to a Navy ship and fell in love for the first time. And that was traumatic, to say the least, for
Mm.
me and for my boyfriend.
Were you able, when you were going through all of this in the beginning, were you able to talk to anybody about any of this? Or was it like a floodgate for you if you were afraid if you started talking, you wouldn't stop talking, and so you had to keep your mouth shut?
When I left the Navy SEALs, I said, I'm telling everybody. Like I'm not, I was 19 years old. I went to my friend, told her immediately, and she was the first person I told was incredibly supportive. She was like, this is awesome, Lance. Like, she was so supportive. And then I started telling my family, and then that was wild. The different reactions were huge. And then the church found out, and then I never talked to the church people again, pretty much. And so I was being very, very open, but then I got to the ship and I realized, oh, I can't be open here, can I? So then I started to try to figure out, I would tell my closest friends. There was a small group of people on the boat that I was out to. I don't think it was like shocking to anybody when they found out I was gay, because I was sort of living openly but silently, if that makes sense. And then when I fell in love with my boyfriend on the ship, that's when it really couldn't really keep it a secret anymore. And then I get involved with a court martial where he was sexually assaulted by somebody else on the boat. And then everything just goes to absolute hell after that. Because even telling your story, even being a witness, it wasn't even my story. It was my boyfriend's story. And I had some very small information that helped the case. The guy who had assaulted him threatened to kill me. And so I, was a witness, and I told the court, I told the investigators that had happened. And then it opened up the floodgates into, well, your personal life is now on the line. It's open for discussion. So then I was outed officially because I was a witness in the trial. There were no witness rights, in that situation. So really it laid bare everything about my life. I was completely vulnerable and open and expecting to be kicked out, dishonorably discharged from the Navy. And I was really lucky, and I won't go into all the details because it's a lot in the book, but I did not get dishonorably discharged. And that to me was the first real show of support and goodness and humanity that really I was able to hold on to this fact and create a whole new life. Even though I was dealing with all the traumatic events of my past, I had this thing that somebody else did for me to stand up for me. And for me, that was life changing. And it has continued to, like, to this day, I'm still in contact with this person. They are an absolute model of humanity in my life. And I hope to pay it forward, because one person's actions completely changed the direction of my life.
There's such sequences both in the Navy SEALs and when you were going through the training to be a fireman, that where you're pushing yourself so hard. And I think it's part of this speaks to your excellence in terms of how well you were doing to be honorably discharged, because you were, not only were you doing everything you were supposed to be doing and doing it right, you were doing it better than most of the people. And I kept thinking, was some of this drive for you tied to your sexuality and tied to those concerns?
Absolutely. I think as queer people, we're held to an extremely high bar. This idea of excellence, there's no other option because, it's so hard to, in my experience, to succeed as a queer person, as an openly queer person in life. There's so much against you that you have to be perfect. You have to be excellent. It's actually something that I talk about with my friends now, and with my therapist, that this need to be perfect, it's not really serving me. And so, yes, that absolutely informed my trajectory for sure. It gave me the motivation. There's also negatives to that too, but I think that I also had a lot of emotional stuff and traumatic experiences that I needed to work out. And the way that I could work it out in my mind in a healthy way was physically. And that did happen through work, through the Navy, and through firefighting. But even to this day, I go on these long physical treks to go climb mountains, and to me it's cathartic. It's a way to have that introspection with myself, come to terms with what has happened in my life, and then also choose how I'm going to react to these things that have happened. And so, yeah, the physical facts, the part of that process, have been incredibly helpful for me to overcome some of these really terrible situations.
So jumping ahead a bit, at 27, you got evicted from your apartment because land was being developed, and so you ended up living on a boat. Which, and let me just add that it was a small boat for
It
someone
was
who
a
is
small boat.
6'3". I think there's something to me that's very poignant and telling about you, who is physically so large, trying to push yourself down
Mm,
to live into these. It's almost like your spiritual and emotional life was running in tandem with your
mm,
physical life at that point.
I agree. Totally.
So interesting.
And I love that chapter. I try to sum up most of that 6 years in one chapter, and it really was teaching me the physicality of it, me squeezing myself into these tiny boxes, me not being able to just stand up straight and own who I am in life and accept the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, just to accept it. I was trying so much to be this idea, and living on the boat kind of laid all that bare too. And it gave me a chance to understand my body more. It was very introspective. It was very isolating as well. I was alone a lot of the time, living alone. But I was also able to say, okay, so this is who I am. And now what do I want to do with this? Where do I want to go? And then, the boat, I could sail. I could go anywhere. And I did. I sailed all the time, and I'd bring friends along. And it opened up this new chapter of adventure for my life. And I think that was when I was starting to say, I'm not going to hide anymore. And it's not as simple as a one decision, you know, I, I'm not going to hide. I'm out, period. Coming out is a continual process. You get a new job. You have to come out to everybody at your new job.
Always,
It's a
always.
continual thing. So, but I wanted to get to the point where it wasn't a problem or a challenge every time I came to the table with it. I wanted it to be nonchalant. I wanted it to be how I felt about it inside, which was like, I'm proud of who I am, but I'm not that different from everybody else. And so
Right.
that's when it started to really, and you'll see in the firefighting, when you put that to the fire, and when there's costs associated with it, and when you could lose your job again, and all these things, it's not so easy to step up to the plate. And it requires dedication and determination and a lot of messiness. My life, I did not live a clean, perfectly trimmed life. It was messy. I made so many mistakes, but somehow along the way, in that messiness, I got to amazing places. And so the fire department for me was that reward, hard earned, not only through the physical aspect of becoming a firefighter, but overcoming all my past to be able to be okay with who I am as an openly out gay man.
So take us through then what led you to the firehouse. What led you to say, I'm going to be a firefighter?
It came down to a couple things. One is the physical. I love the physical stuff. I need to be doing stuff with my body. I need to be lifting or hiking or climbing, and that's all this stuff. But, I learned something in the Navy is that I really wanted to help people. And something I learned from the Navy SEALs is I got there and I realized that their version of helping people is to be assassins and kill the bad guys. And I'm like, that's not what I was thinking I wanted to do. I want to help people. I want to actually like physically help remove them from danger. And so it really became a psychological, a philosophical like lifestyle choice of I want to go to
Mm.
people in their darkest hour because I know what it's like to be in your darkest hour and not have someone. And I'm like, I want to go out there and be that person for someone. And firefighting was the fastest way I could do that with my background and my skill sets. And I loved it. I found this spiritual quality to giving back to the community through firefighting. And I've experienced a lot of death through that job, being with people in their final moments, and to have that honor of and that responsibility to be with somebody as they leave this world and offer them kindness and support and love. I think that that's a phenomenal task to try to rise to that occasion. And then also just running into burning buildings and trying to pull people out. That doesn't happen as much these days because we have good technology. There are fires, but people get out quicker. So more what we deal with is the medical side of, people having heart attacks and people in car accidents. And that's more of the modern firefighting. But yeah, I get to do a range of things and that excites me. I think that's what showing up to work every day and not knowing what was going to happen is something that really gets me going. I think that's awesome, but also probably a byproduct of my past.
And maybe you can explain this to me because I don't know. Like I grew up and my brother was a volunteer fireman. And I don't know if some cities or counties have strictly it's voluntary versus being employed.
Yeah, so that's how I started my career. Right after college, I started volunteering on an island close to Seattle, Vashon Island. And usually it's your proving ground. It's like being an intern. You work for free to show them what you've got. You get your certifications, you build a platform, and then ultimately, yeah, you hope that leads to a professional paid career job. I think at the time that I was volunteering, there were 70% of the workforce of firefighters in the nation were volunteers. So
Wow.
really, the big cities are where, or the suburbs are where you get to, be paid to be a firefighter. So many firefighters do it out of the kindness of their heart.
Wow. And this was the other thing. I know I'd asked you this previously. How many firefighters are there in just the Seattle station? Is that what I'm saying? Is that or that
Yeah, so
division?
the city of Seattle, they have about roughly 40 fire stations across the city and over 1,000 firefighters out of us. Yep.
Wow, that's really, really incredible. Has your views about the job, and there's risk with any job, but has it changed at all now since you're a dad?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I only been a dad for 7 weeks now, and I haven't actually went back to work yet. I'm still on the parental leave, so going back to work, it's going to be funny. I'm going to go back to work as a dad and as a published author of a book talking about this job. I 100% expect for things to be different. I think for me, risk as a gay man, as an outdoor enthusiast, as a firefighter, as a veteran, risk has been a very big part of my life.
Mm.
It's a constant, and I have a very strong relationship with risk. I think that it's also personal for each person, but for me, my risk, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere in my life if I wasn't capable of accepting a certain amount of risk, and at times an exorbitant amount of risk. I ideally don't want to take that much risk, but risk is a normal, natural part of life, and it's something that I embrace. I think that I'm learning every day because I put myself in positions that are slightly risky, that I have something to lose. I think it also makes you feel very alive and very grateful. I can't believe where I'm at in life right now. I am so grateful. And risk taught me that. Not everybody has been able to live a life like this, openly gay, blue collar guy with a family. I mean, to me, it's so beautiful, and it's such a everyday present thing to be like, wow, I know how rare and how awesome this is because of where I came from.
Is there anything that scares you?
Oh, yes. Releasing this book scares me. Talking about it publicly scares me. It's one thing to kind of like come into your head and just kind of come to terms with things on your own, quietly in your own corner. It's a whole other thing to bring it out into the open and then get people's responses, see how people view it themselves. So yeah, this whole process is scary. I think that being a firefighter, it's not scary running into a fiery inferno. It's absolutely scary. It's just you do it for a reason. And I think for me, I talk about that in the first two chapters of the book. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. When you have a reason to do things, then the fear kind of goes away a little bit. It's always there, but it's when you have a reason, you kind of push through. And so I have lots of reasons, to continue forward and to release this book. And I did it for myself, my younger version of myself, because I had a hard time finding those examples. And I did it also for the next generations. Like, I hope that this book is so irrelevant,
Right.
tomorrow, today, that like the next generation's like, wow, that's crazy that happened
The
back in the
time
day.
capsule. This is a
Like,
time.
I can't wait for that day,
Oh, right.
you
That's
know?
quaint. Yeah.
Totally, exactly.
And there's a whole queer
Dude.
firehouse somewhere.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah, I can't.
Right.
That would be awesome.
Right. Flamethrowers number 42. Right. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, sign me
Right.
up.
We first of all, the first thing I wanted to say to you is I find you're so interesting because you have such an interesting dichotomy between a job that puts you at risk, that is at times high stakes and all manners of it, and then the other side of you that's about solitude and quiet and hiking and mountain climbing and being close to nature. It's so yin and yang, and I think that is so fascinating, and how one schism of your life kind of feeds the other part and back and forth. It's fascinating, and it's big dips. Like, most people will go see a scary movie. So you say earlier in the book how your parents had encouraged you and your siblings to become missionaries.
Yeah.
And I just looked up the actual definition of a missionary as someone who is sent somewhere to help promote a certain faith or provide services to people. And it's so interesting to me that you've kind of fulfilled that desire, even though it's not in the way that they might have originally seen
So
it.
funny.
But hearing you speak about this stuff, you said across the decades of my life, from child to young man to adult, I realize that I've been created, conditioned, encouraged to be this in role. And in that actualization, I have come full circle. And I thought that was so beautiful to see. And I thought a lot about your parents and your mom. And I hope that she recognizes that, and in you, because in just talking to you, you are a servant in some ways. And I don't mean that in a it's literally like, if Christ was very much that much a servant of the people and what you're doing for people and how you're helping people, I think it's really kind of amazing how it's kind of come to fruition.
It's so interesting. I don't think I intentionally, it wasn't something that I tried to do. It's just how life played out. And in that way, I'm really grateful to my parents for giving me such a great upbringing. I think that it was hard being a gay kid in that environment. And I think that there's a lot about the religion stuff that I don't
Mm.
agree with, but there's so much good that I was able to take from my upbringing and you know, share that with the world. And it took a lot of years to understand that and to see it from that perspective, the good with the bad. And so I'm really grateful that I can take those lessons from my childhood and use them. And I hope to do this. I feel so like huge obligations because I've been so privileged. I mean, I know how I'm writing a book right now about the historical figures in mountaineering who were queer that I found,
Mm.
and how truly brutal their past and their lives have been. And that is a common thread through queer history. And I'm just looking at my life and how have I been so lucky? I mean, granted, it's been tough. It's crazy stuff that happened, but man, I've been so lucky. And I just feel so obligated to help continue that storyline. Like, how can we continue to help people be lucky and live good, supported, beautiful lives? Like, isn't that what everybody wants? I hope to
Yeah.
continue that thread and to give back and to encourage it.
But I would also say to you, I think there is luck involved, but I also think it's some of your choices and it is perseverance. But also that's what you view as luck. Some of that's just inside you as a person. So that that speaks volumes. And certainly luck is involved, but I'm a firm believer that like attracts like and positive will attract positive. And I just look at you and I'm so, first of all, like I'm so blown away just in terms of your spirit and your positivity and the way that you choose to live your life. I think it's amazing. And I'm so excited to see you. And I feel so fortunate to be able to, hopefully for a long time, watch you with your kids and the way you are as a dad. I think you guys are both going to be amazing. But as your children grow up and the lessons that you're going to teach them and in that, I think it's a really amazing thing. So congrats. I think it's great.
Thanks, Brett. You've lived and continue to live a phenomenal, beautiful life, and are an example to the community. I mean, boy, do we need those! Every single one of those lights shining. And so, thank you for doing that. And you're doing all the same stuff. You're out in the community, giving back, doing awesome stuff for people, especially writers. Who, I mean, we know how hard it is for writers to, you know, make a living and do what they love. So thank you for that. The literature world needs more of us, I think. And I hope,
I
and that's,
agree.
yeah. So thank you for being that light.
Well, I appreciate that. I think we're all now more than ever. I think we all need it, whatever that way is,
Yep.
to kind of pull each other through whatever this is.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much for sitting down with me. The funny thing is, if I had got on this earlier, we could have done it at one of our houses together. But
That would have been awesome.
but please go out and get the book, buy independent if you can, but it's really fantastic. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to see where all this goes, and obviously I'm excited just to hang out.
Likewise. Well, thank you so much for having me, Brett. This has been an awesome conversation, and yeah, very real. And boy, I love those conversations that are just real. So thank you.